Hey, David Brewster here with the Brewster's Millions of Rants, and this is Turn the Beat Around. And I've received some comments and some requests for metronome suggestions or practicing with the metronome. And I've also had some requests for legato, technique and exercises. So I thought, why not, kind of tackle both those at the same time, kill two birds, with one stone. So we're going to look at, practicing with the metronome, and we're going to also talk a little bit about phrasing with legato, and we're going to work on both those at the same time. So as far as metronomes are concerned, you can go for the digital type, like this little Korg, which those are really useful. You've got a visual display, you can adjust the tempo. I think there's even like a built-in tuner and stuff. Even though I don't really use that to tune with, to be honest. I just use it as a metronome. And of course, I just completely, there we go. But that is a really good metronome. And then also you can opt for the old school, like pendulum style metronome, which these are, very respected and kind of the classic, metronome. So either one. It doesn't really matter, but the important thing, I mean, you can use an app on your phone, you can use, there's various other ways you can use a metronome. I kind of like the little Korg because it's about the size of a credit card. You can put it in your case. In case you don't have like a good, signal or something, if you're somewhere like in the middle of, nowhere at a gig or rehearsal or something, it's nice to actually have a metronome. That way you don't always have to rely on your phone. What if your battery's dead, or what if whatever, your phone crashes or something. So I kind of like to actually just have a metronome. So the ideas that we're going to talk about and look at, I kind of compiled from my own kind of study and working with students. We're going to also pick up some ideas that I picked up from people like Steve Morse and John Petrucci. And speaking of Steve Morse, which this is kind of turning into almost like a book corner, it's a rant series slash book, review series. But if you haven't heard or read Open Ears, which was compiled all these old Steve Morse, articles and columns from Guitar One magazine, it's not a very thick book, but Open Ears is great. I'm a big Steve Morse fan, and it's all text. There's no musical examples or anything like that. It's just stories from the road and, practicing and preparation, for basically being a musician. It's not really technique and licks and stuff like that. He's really kind of given you, this inside scoop as far as sessions, practicing, rehearsing, all sorts of useful information. There's an article that he wrote for Guitar for the Practicing Musician that isn't in that book, and I have a copy of it actually. I think it's in my filing cabinet over there. But he was talking about practicing with a metronome, and I remember when I saw the article and I read it, I really liked it, and I just tore it out of the magazine, and somehow magically I've been able to save that all these years later. But he was talking about using a metronome and really listening for the click, as you practice like a scale or a sequence or exercise. And he was saying that, you're really nailing, the time. You're really nailing that click if the click disappears. If you hear the click as you practice something, then you're probably not right on time, right? You might be a little bit fast or a little bit slow because you're able to hear that click. But if you're nailing the time, like Steve said in that article, the click almost disappears. It's almost like you don't really hear it because whatever you just played or accented fell perfectly in time with that click. And that's really hard to do. But that's something I think you should strive for when you practice with the metronome. See if you can get that click to kind of disappear, so to speak. The first idea I'm going to share here, actually, I borrowed this concept from John Petrucci, and you can find this in his Wild Stringdom book. And in the book, which was also in Guitar World magazine, he was doing this with string skipping. And, that's really cool, and I love string skipping. But to make it even easier, and that way we don't, kind of alienate or leave anybody, in the dust, let's simplify it even more, and let's just make it a pentatonic idea, and we can always convert it to string skipping like John did. But this will make it very simple so you can see the concept, you can hear it, and then you can expand on this from there. So we're just going to take the top two strings of B minor pentatonic, which is going to be right here. And I'm going to use the digital metronome, and I'm going to set it on 80 beats per minute. And the reason I'm setting it on 80 is just so it's easy. We don't want to set it too fast to where, we're going to be struggling to keep up. When you start practicing with the metronome, you want to set it at a comfortable tempo and really lock in. And then you can start boosting that tempo higher. So I'm going to set it at 80 just so, like I said earlier, as far as changing this from string skipping to pentatonic, I'm just trying to simplify this, so we can start in an easy place, and then you can definitely, kind of make it more advanced and harder from there. We're going to start, this at a very easy tempo, and then if it's too easy for you and you're like, well, this is simple, man, then you can make it harder. You can string skip, you can play it twice as fast, you can change the scale. I mean, you don't have to make it a pentatonic. You can make it, Phrygian dominant or Lydian dominant or whatever you want. But the idea is going to base around this. Okay, just descending fours, or you can think of that as 16th notes. 1 E and 2 E and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And with the metronome set on 80, what we're going to do is we're going to start by, grabbing the D note, hitting that on, beat 1 or click 1, and then descend that 4-note phrase. So we're basically accenting or starting on that 10th fret on the note D, and that would sound like this. Now listen to what it sounds like if we start on B, and so we're going to accent and begin on that note, and we're going to turn the beat around. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing and start now on A, and we're going to accent and begin on that A note, and it's going to turn the beat around again. And then finally, of course, we're going to start on that F sharp, and that sounds like this. So hopefully you can kind of hear by, having that little 4-note phrase and then starting on a different note, it changed, kind of changed the character. It changed the way that little, lick flowed. And that's the power of rhythm, just by altering a phrase or a lick that you're playing with, and maybe putting the emphasis on a different note, it's going to change the way it sounds, even though it's the same 4 notes, but the rhythm is going to have a stronger pull. And I think, some of those variations, sounded more interesting than the original lick that we started with. So play with this, take some licks that you practice or that you like, and begin on a different note, or end on a different note, and just kind of play with the rhythm, play with the timing, but more importantly, play with your metronome. So I was picking through those phrases, but you can always turn that into legato too. And that's one thing I was going to recommend or just kind of suggest is, anytime you learn a picking lick, one of the first things you should try, or one of the first things I always try, is I immediately flip it to legato. And then when I learn a legato lick, then I try to pick through it, so I just kind of mix and match, and you might be surprised. Sometimes you'll find some busy picking lick, and then if you apply legato to it, it might sound different. It might sound cooler, or it might sound, like a variation that you want to explore. And you can kind of go either way. You can pick more, you can pick less, and that's a pretty good, starting point just for, really kind of branching out and trying, legato in different ways. Now, if you really want to turn the beat around, now we're going to deal with different rhythmic groupings. And I know this is an area that I've had a lot of students ask. I had confusion about this, and I've seen a lot of questions online too. So it's going to start very basic, and we're going to basically start with triplets. Then we're going to move to 16th notes. Then we're going to move to groupings of 5. We're going to move to groupings of 6, groupings of 7, and then we're going to flip it to 32nd notes. So we're going to start slow. We're going to keep the metronome at 80. But you'll notice like each cycle, we're going to get a little bit faster and a little bit faster. And we're going to work with that click. see, and I kind of slopped my way through there, but you can see I was basically adding a new note to each phrase, and that basically impacted how I played against that metronome. And I was kind of pushing, I think, a little bit there at the end, but at least, I demonstrated what I was talking about here. Take groups of three, the triplets, and then sixteenths, and then basically quintuplets, or groups of five, and then sextuplets, groups of six, and then septuplets, groups of seven, and then good old-fashioned 30-second notes. And then just some kind of quick things here at the end to build some additional strength, rhythmically and as far as timekeeping and really feeling the pulse and the click of music. And you can do this away from your guitar. There's obviously a ton of things you can do, on the guitar, actually practicing. But let's say you're driving somewhere, like you're going to work or you're going on vacation or you're, going to the grocery store to get milk or whatever you're doing in the car. Turn the radio on, and I don't want anybody to get into an accident. But one thing I do when I'm driving, I'm almost always, using my left leg and tapping, my foot as I drive, in time with whatever I'm listening to. And that's honestly something I've always done when I drive a car. I don't know, even back when I first got my license in my first car, I would put music on, drive down the road, and tap my foot with the music. I'd start headbanging my head. Sometimes I'd even kind of like do little patterns of things with my fingers on the steering wheel, or I would just hit the steering wheel, rhythmically. And there's tons of stuff like that you can do where, like I said, you don't have to necessarily even have your guitar. You could be, anywhere. Let's say you're at a recital at somebody's school and they're playing, piano or something and you're bored. Or let's say it's really bad and you're like, oh my gosh, why did I come to this recital? It sounds like they're killing geese with all these bassoons or whatever. But, you could quietly sit there and tap your foot. You could tap out little rhythms on your leg. Sometimes I'll do this little thing with my thumb where I'll just kind of sit there and run up and down almost like a chromatic scale. But I'm doing it rhythmically, right? Or you can kind of alternate that too. It's kind of a poor man's gripmaster, which I do have a gripmaster over there too. But, I'm not really a drummer. I can play, basic beats, but I have noticed ever since I was a teenager, I'm very rhythmic. I'm constantly tapping or, kind of thinking of rhythm, or like back when I used to chew gum a lot, I would chew gum in rhythm. Like I would listen to music and I'd catch myself chewing at the same tempo as the song. So you have to think rhythm. You have to be, if you're having trouble with rhythm and timekeeping and all that, you just have to basically force yourself to be more rhythmic. Think more rhythm, feel the rhythm, however you need to do it. If you need to start dancing, start dancing. If you need to start tapping your foot, tapping your leg, or, whatever, snapping your fingers, whatever you need to do. But think and feel that rhythm. All right, that's going to wrap up this rant, which this I think was more of a lesson than an actual rant. I did talk about metronomes and timekeeping, so maybe I was ranting. But, leave some feedback and some comments. Let me know if you got anything from this. And please subscribe to Late Night Lessons. And I'll be back with some more content and lessons very soon. Thank you.